let's get started with the Future Fit presentation. So also I have to let you know that my son is in the background, so apologies if there's any background noise there. So the whole rationale behind this workshop, this presentation, is to discuss how one action addressed towards a natural hazard like a bushfire or heat wave or storm can have multiple benefits across other natural disasters, and also provide a energy efficiency benefit or dividend. So it's a guide. Essentially, it's a fairly high level, and it's to help residents understand what's best for them, what they can choose to do, because retrofitting your house and making it fit for the future can be quite a daunting topic, and there can be a lot of things to do. So the aim of this is to help simplify things and help you understand that one action can have multiple benefits, and that can help guide your decision-making process. We won't be covering details on products, techniques, specifications. Sorry, it's the wrong slide. We'll be covering details on products, techniques, specifications, as every home and situation is different, especially where bushfire is concerned. So for more detail on retrofitting just for bushfire, you can watch a presentation specifically on this topic on Council's YouTube page. This presentation was run by an architect, Nigel Bell, and he really does a really good job on that one. In fact, I think many of you attending tonight's presentation might have actually attended that workshop. Okay, so once you have an idea after this workshop, once you have an idea of what retrofit action suits you, it's always best to consult a builder, a bushfire consultant, or other expert to help you with that specific action, with that specific retrofit. And we will only be discussing retrofits that intersect across different natural hazards and pay an energy efficiency dividend. Now, if we were to talk about just bushfire retrofits alone, that could take up to a 2-hour session or longer, and we would just be scratching the surface. Okay, so why future fit homes? Well, right now, as you can all appreciate, some of us are either working from home comfortably and expensively, or we could be shivering at home with extra layers of jumpers and thick woolly socks and a heater under the desk. Right now, we're paying our own heating bills during work hours. And it's not uncommon to see our colleagues on Zoom meetings wearing thick jumpers and scarves. In fact, today I noticed a few colleagues during a Zoom meeting wearing just the same sort of heavy clothing as well. Okay, so now bushfires is the first natural hazard we'll just quickly touch on, and I'll cover off bushfires, storms, and heat waves in fairly light detail. I won't go into too much detail about that, because I'm sure all of you know a lot about what Ku-ring-gai faces here. So the changes to the bushfire season were projected by researchers and presented in various research reports quite a long time ago. Now, as you can see, Ross Garneau in his climate change review predicted that the fire seasons will start earlier, end slightly later, and generally be more intense. This effect will increase over time and will be directly observable by 2020. Okay, and then the chart there, as you can see, came out 2 years after that, again, doing their own independent research, and they found the same thing. As you can see there in the middle of the chart, at 2020, there is an uptick in the days of high fire danger. So moving on to the past year or so, all the reports and predictions came to pass in the form of the Black Summer bushfires that devastated large areas of bushland, destroyed homes, and traumatized many communities. And now North America is having a horrendous time of it right now, and they're having their own Black Summer. So what a lot of people might not have known is that the Gospers Mountain fire that was burning up back over in just over near Wiseman's Ferry was only 1 day away from the North Shore. Had the conditions been right, the fire would have been on our doorstep within 1 day. We were also very lucky that the Canoon Road fire was put out as fast as it was, It was a combination of great preparation by the local RFS brigades and a huge dose of good luck. The tanker was there to drop its load of fire retardant. Now, had our luck with either fires been less different, this would be a rebuilding workshop rather than a retrofitting workshop. And this is because Ku-ring-gai is the third most bushfire risk LGA in New South Wales. We're surrounded by 3 national parks and have a long and intricate bushland interface with many areas that have only one way in and one way out. And to make matters worse, the leading cause of house loss during bushfire is ember attack rather than direct flame and heat. And that puts most of the houses in Ku-ring-gai at risk because embers can travel up to 20 kilometers ahead of the fire front. In Lake Conjola and Tathra, many homes that were lost in those fires were not even anywhere near mapped bushfire zones. So after all that, the conclusion I'd like everyone to take away is that we need to prepare our homes for bushfires and ember attack in particular, especially considering the conditions are only likely to get worse in the coming decades. Now, storms. This one's quite personal to me as well, as Andy will know. Now, the Ku-ring-gai area and the North Shore is no stranger to storms. Okay, we've had storms; they happen quite frequently, and it might seem as no big deal, but so they happen quite frequently, and Ku-ring-gai has a rich history of storms, and in fact, Ku-ring-gai is more vulnerable to storms than other LGAs in New South Wales or even in Sydney. We have more rain than any other part of Sydney. And we also have the record of having more SES callouts than any other parts of New South Wales. Now, the earliest record of extremely damaging storm, and just as of course during settled periods, and, when the Europeans came to this area, was in 1871. Then not long after that, he had a hailstorm in 1869 that piled hail up to 7 feet high and caused widespread devastation. There were whole orchards completely stripped. It was like winter. There wasn't a leaf on the tree. In fact, the trees were so damaged, badly damaged, that it looked like someone had gone through the orchard and shot it up with a shotgun. We had like buckshot damage everywhere. That was all from the hail. And then, of course, you had a violent tornado in 1906. And that was one of 3 to hit the North Shore, plus another 3 tornadic squalls. And then in December 2018, we had a catastrophic hailstorm that caused $1.2 billion of insured damages in a very small area. And this area was Barara, and it was declared a disaster zone. And more than one home actually had to be rebuilt as a consequence of a hailstorm. So hailstorms can actually destroy homes. I think there's a picture of a house coming up later on, of a house that had to be rebuilt because what happened is that it was during Christmas time or during Christmas holidays, and the roof was destroyed, water got into the house and got everything wet. The problem is that everyone in the household was away on holiday and couldn't get back in time. So the house basically rotted. So they had to have the whole thing replaced. So that's one thing to consider. And that's another reason why you need to think about your house and its roof and how you protect it against storms, because you might not always be there to look after it in case the worst thing happens. And then there's also a prolonged storm that happened in February 2020, between the 7th and the 9th of February. I'm sure everyone remembers that one. That caused widespread blackouts, and many properties were without power for weeks. And now in the image, you can see on the map there with the different colors, orange and yellows and maybe a bit of red. The yellow is areas that had blackouts for just maybe a few hours to one day. The orange is areas that had a blackout for about a week. And then the dark orange areas and even red are areas where people were without power for up to 2 weeks. I made this map myself using ArcGIS and data supplied by Ausgrid. So that's some pretty accurate information there. And of course, we've also had not long ago a microburst that trashed the Gordon and Pymble areas and snapped trees as if they're toothpicks. Perfectly healthy, very strong trees were wiped out by a microburst. So in summary, we can expect a very damaging storm every 11 years, give or take. You might have more, you might have less, but on average, one very damaging storm every 11 years. Now, as the climate heats up, you can expect it will store more energy and more moisture. And more energy in the atmosphere means that you'll have more energetic storms potentially, but definitely more moisture, which means more intense rainfall. East coast lows now occur with 70% more moisture in the air, which again means that that moisture has to come out somewhere, and that's in that form it's going to be rain. So with that in mind, we need to think about how we can make our homes more resilient to storm damage, or at least reduce the loss and disruption to our lives. Okay, so another reason why we need to have a future fit home: heat waves. Again, you might think, well, what's the big deal about heat waves? We have them every year, no big deal. We seem to get through by them. But we have to look behind the headlines. For example, on the left, you see a headline of Sydney is gripped by a scorching 40-degree heat wave, and they show a picture of people just going to the beach having a great time. Okay, but the reality is that 1 in 3 deaths since 1991 have been linked to climate change, and it's the heat. 1 in 3 heat deaths since 1991 have been linked to climate change. Yeah, and then the government of the Australian government state of the Australian cities report back in 2013 found that major heat waves have caused more deaths since 1890 than bushfires, cyclones, earthquakes, floods, and severe storms combined. Okay, so the heat wave is a serious issue, and it's only going to get worse. In fact, globally, 55,736 people since 1970 have died from heat waves. That's globally. And the people most at risk are going to be the elderly, the ill, and the very young. Now, Australians, we tend to cope fairly well with extreme heat compared with other countries, such as France and other European countries. Now, speaking of France, back in 2003, in August, 70,000 people died from a heat wave there. At the time, they didn't know how many people died through heat wave. They thought it was a fairly low number, but when researchers go back through the medical records and reanalyze things, they found that a lot of people died directly because of the heat wave, because the heat waves exacerbated pre-existing conditions. It made, and of course, their homes they lived in were not very good for the heat, so they could actually attribute all these deaths to the heat wave. Now, here in Ku-ring-gai, we tend to be at a lower risk of extreme heat due to the terrain, the tree-lined streets, and generally leafy suburbs. However, the temperatures are rising. Now, back in 2013, the Bureau of Meteorology had to add a whole new color to take its temperature scale up to 54 degrees. And then, of course, 9 of the 10 hottest years in Australia have occurred since 2005, with 2019 being the hottest year on record. In fact, that fact might be a little bit out of date, considering it's 2021 and North America is currently in flames. And then, of course, between 2015 and 2019 was the hottest on record, which I just mentioned there. Okay, and then bring it forward a bit more, we had the 2018-2019 angry summer. Now, over that summer, 206 records were broken in just 90 days. And of course, this was followed by the Black Summer. Okay, so going back to the heat waves again. Now, this is some work done by Waverley Council in conjunction with some consultants, Randwick City Council and the New South Wales government and local government New South Wales. They did some modelling, and they found that in 2030, the cooling loads on the average home will increase by 70%, according to a baseline. Now, in 2070, they project that cooling loads could increase by 308% on average again. And the dwellings currently, homes currently approved to be built under basics will be unsuitable for occupation by 2070, without extremely high levels of mechanical cooling, namely being your air conditioning unit. So that can lead to issues such as peak demand issues, blackouts, affordability and fairness on who can afford heat cooling, and what people can do. And also, if you combine this with the backdrop of a global pandemic, if you're in lockdown during summer, you can't escape to anywhere cool. You can't go to swimming pools, you can't go to shopping centers, you can't go to cinema, you can't go to the coast. You're locked in your suburbs. So we're lucky right now we're in lockdown during wintertime, but I can tell you now it would be a pretty dire situation if we're in an extended lockdown during an extended heat wave as well. Okay, so insurance, I'll cover this very quickly. I don't want to delve too deeply into it. It's having impact on insurance. Now, since 2010, natural disasters have cost insurers about $29 billion. And now, while insurance, that's what they're there for. That's what they're supposed to do. But globally, it can be a bit of an issue, because while what insurance companies do is that insurance companies have insurance for themselves, so that if they get clobbered by, like, the Black Summer or an earthquake or a massive flood, they can call on their insurance company to bail them out. And that insurance company are relying on the fact that elsewhere in the world, they're not having massive natural disasters as well. But in the climate we're in, many places around the world could be going up in flames, having earthquakes, having massive floods. And then all these countries are now calling in on their insurance policies, and these reinsurers will be kind of in a very tight spot. And this could result in higher premiums, or even being left out of insurance altogether, because I think you might be aware of that some parts of Northern Territory were uninsurable due to their natural disasters they've been having, and the likelihood of having a natural disaster come and hit them. Okay, so and to bring it back home, here's a little bit of research done by the ABC together with Risk Frontiers. They projected that there's going to be increases in premiums from now up until 2100. That's what the graphic shows. And as you can see, the areas that are getting redder and redder are mostly in the north east, where we are. So we're likely to experience an increase in our insurance premiums. Of course, in the southeast, those suburbs are likely to see another large increase in their insurance premiums. So, yeah. So and then this relates back to your house, because if you can't get insurance, or the insurance is very expensive, you're going to want to do everything you can to minimize the damage done to your house, which means you don't have to, which could potentially in the future, hopefully, reduce your insurance premiums. That's ideally where things can go. So in the ideal world, the more resilient your house is, the more likely you are to get a reduction in your insurance premium. In fact, I think some parts of Queensland, homes that are resilient to cyclones, get a reduced insurance premium. And there is, I think, talk about extending that towards bushfire and other extreme weather events, but please don't quote me on that. I'll believe it when I see it. Okay, so bring it back down to the house again. The past, the present, the future. So my house actually is a house on the left. It's the past. That's what I call it's an old brick veneer tent. Now the house doesn't look like that anymore. I've had a renovation done, so it looks very differently. I've made it much more resilient to extreme weather. So this presentation is also a bit of a story of the journey I've gone through to make sure my house is a bit more fit for the future for my own son, who's only 14 months old. So that's the past. It's a brick veneer house, poorly insulated, very, very drafty, soaks up the heat during the night and pumps it back into the house at nighttime. So it's really unpleasant to live in. Right now, we have new builds. This house in the middle is a house not far away from me. It was rebuilt according to basics. It's metal framed, dark colors. And this was a house I mentioned that was, I think, had to be rebuilt due to the hail damage. Now, this is nothing wrong with this house. It's built to basics. They've done everything properly. It's just that the standards, it's built to a minimum standard, which is part of the problem. So I understand that basics is being under review and will be improved, but from what I understand, the standard of basics needs to be raised quite significantly in order to make the houses built now suitable for the future. And then now, if we want to fast forward to the future, we have, and the future is here. And to quote someone, I forget who it is, the future is here, but it's just not very evenly distributed. The house on the right is a passive house. It's built over in Asquith, and the passive house is essentially what I would deem a future fit house. It's basically airtight, very well insulated, and the shape and form lends itself towards very low amounts of heat gain or heat loss, and right now that's I would say is the current gold standard of how to build a house that's going to be suitable for the future. The passive houses are gaining traction in Australia, and the actual design principles or concepts came from Germany as well. And they have a very very cold climate, but what works in the cold will work very well in the heat as well. Okay, so before we get into the nuts and bolts of the things you can do to make sure your house is fit for the future, I just want to cover off on the bushfire construction, bushfire prone land, specifically, because we won't go into too much detail about the bow levels and what that means and how to get that, and we won't go into details of what's contained within the Australian standard for construction of buildings in bushfire prone land, because again that's quite a big topic, and but I will refer back to that a bit. This summary table here you see in front of you, you can donate, you can get that for free. It's a very good starting point, and it gives you if you're not familiar with bow levels or bow ratings, definitely highly recommend you read that to get your head around it, and then delve deep into the AS 3959 if you happen to have a house that is on bushfire prone land. The Australian standard was free to download up until I think June, but I do believe there are some copies floating around the internet. So if you wander around, I'm sure you might find one, but I can't tell you where to look. I don't think that'd be very good of me as a council employee. Okay, so let's get stuck into it. So the roof. Now, the first thing I'll talk about is also, I just want to quickly cover off that. Again, we'll be fairly high level. So a lot of these things might not seem that earth-shattering, but when taken into context of wrapping them up all together into one bundle for resilient homes, it will make sense when you think about it in terms of bushfire, storms, heat waves, and that kind of stuff. And just to help understand my slides, the color-coded, the different colors there on the sides of each picture relate to the kind of hazard or topic we're talking about. The red is bushfire, gray is storm, the yellow is heat wave, and green is obviously energy efficiency or thermal comfort. And then the black bars on the side. The thick black bar means that it has a strong benefit, or it has a benefit, a definitive benefit. And the thin grey line means that it has some benefit. And then if there's no black bar beside it, it has no benefit. So let's start with the roof sarking. So a fully sarked roof has benefits towards bushfire, storms, heat waves, and energy efficiency. The sarking will help keep embers that get past the roof material from starting a fire in the roof. During a bushfire, there's often very high winds that can lift tiles, or they can be broken due to debris flying around, and that will let embers in. And now, of course, the sarking needs to have a flammability rating not exceeding 5, and of course, the less flammable it is, the better. If you have a tiled roof, it's always advisable to check that your tiles are tied down as much as possible. A lot of tiles aren't. So if you happen to be caught in a bushfire, there are very high winds, and definitely your tiles can be lifted up, and that can be an entry point for embers. So you really want to have some sarking in your roof as well. Now, if you happen to live in a bow flame zone, and you're going to redo your roof and you're going to bring it up to code, definitely engage an expert in this area, and have a strong talk with them about condensation issues. And again, it gets very technical, so I won't get into it. But if you do happen to live in the bow flame zone, there are some considerations you need to think about that aren't necessarily covered in the Australian standard. Now, in terms of energy efficiency and heat waves, now there are some benefits to keeping starting to keep a house cool. However, from what I understand, the emphasis is more on the wrapping of the roof and how well it's wrapped to control airflow, rather than the exact type of sarking you're using. Okay. So, and then for storm, in a very similar way to how sarking can protect you from embers entering your house. I think sarking is it has a very good strong benefit in terms of keeping water out. And that's the principal reason why roofs are sarked as well, is to manage moisture and manage water. If you have a broken tile, a good sarking will be a godsend. It will help direct water into your gutters rather than into your roof, into your insulation, into your gyprock that can then collapse and trash your house. Where I live in Barara, my house, in fact, was just badly damaged by a hailstorm. If I had a fully sarked roof, I can tell you now the amount of work that had to be done on the house would have been a lot less. I was just lucky that my ceilings and walls were made of asbestos, because if I had gyprock, I could have expected gyprock to come collapsing down my head. But of course, the asbestos was a whole nother issue altogether, which, again, would rather not have had to have dealt with. But swings and roundabouts. Yes, so that's sarking for the storms. So next one up is the light-colored roof or metal. Now this is a tricky one, because obviously if you live in Ku-ring-gai, tiles are the dominant form of roofing, and it's not always easy to change your roof material, especially if you live in a heritage area. But the reason why a light-colored metal roof is preferable to a tiled roof is that tiles are heavy, they absorb heat during the day and radiate it back out at night. So the heat hangs around a lot longer. And they're easy to break. Old tiles can be hard to replace, and tile recyclers might not actually have your tiles in stock, especially if there's a large hailstorm where a lot of roofs get trashed and people need replacement tiles. Okay. So, and especially if they're heritage tiles and they're very specific, you might be very in a tight spot finding replacement tile. And like I mentioned, roofs in Ku-ring-gai tend to be fairly specific and tend towards tiled roofs. However, you could paint your roof. So if you paint your roof with a different color, you can actually reduce the heat load by maybe up to 70%, and that can make a huge difference. Again, it's a tricky issue, so not something which most people might be able to take advantage of. Now, if you can manage a swap to a metal roof, you'll have benefits across bushfire, storm, heat waves, and energy efficiency. So, and they do not need to be corrugated either. There are other styles out there that might look a lot more pleasing. When my house was hit by the hailstorm, I opted to go towards a metal roof. I did like the tiles, but I just did not want to go through the drama and the expense of having to go through the insurance negotiations and all that kind of stuff. When I could simply avoid all that by getting a metal roof installed. And the good thing about a metal roof is that if it does get damaged, and hail can go through a metal roof, it's very easy to repair, and it won't be as much of an issue as it would be had it been a tiled roof. Okay, and storms, of course, I just mentioned that. So I won't repeat that. And of course, in bushfires, the metal roof is the preferred style of roof. It has fewer gaps for embers to enter. It's easier to secure to the roof and withstand high winds. And again, it can be very, very resilient towards damage from flying debris and even exploding trees. And yes, trees do explode. Massive chunks of reports during the Black Summer of trees literally just exploding next to people's homes, sending chunks of wood flying in all manner of directions. And these aren't small little chunks of wood, they're talking about big, heavy chunks as well. And of course, if you have a tiled roof, branches or flying debris, trampolines and all that kind of stuff, or your dog's little pet house, can go flying through the air and break a window or break a roof. And those are entry points at embers which can cause your house to burn down. So it's definitely worth considering your options when it comes to replacing your roof with metal. Now, safety glass and toughened glass in your skylight. So yeah, so in terms of, it has a main benefit towards bushfire and storms. If you replace your old standard glass or plastic skylight with toughened glass units with metal mesh, there'll definitely be a benefit in terms of bushfire and storms. Okay, the toughened glass is going to be stronger, less likely to break, and again, the metal mesh or flashing around the skylight would, of course, make it more resilient to bushfire. Now, during heat waves, there is some benefit to, there's some ways you can improve the skylight to a heat wave. You can make the skylight double glazing, and that will help control heat loss and heat gain. However, the skylights can be very handy in terms of letting excess heat out at night to help cool the house down. So it does have that benefit, but ideally you wouldn't want to build up the heat inside your house in the first place. So we would recommend removing skylights altogether. And if light access into your house, getting light into dark parts of your house is an issue, you can always install solar-powered skylights. It's simple, simply a solar panel on your roof with a wire going down into your house connected to an LED light. So basically, when the sun's out, the light's on, and that's how you get your light in there. Okay, and the last slide on the roof, gutter guards. Now, gutter guards are pretty self-explanatory. They keep the gunk out of your gutters, and that can mean you can reduce your bushfire risk. Now, I would highly recommend making sure that the gutter guards are fitted properly. In the picture you see there, the gutter guard is fitted over the last row of tiles and fitted pretty close to the edge there. So it's nice, flush, nice, smooth sort of transition from the tiles over to the edge of the gutters, so that any leaf litter can just simply flow over the top there. And make sure you do them in the valleys of your house as well, because there's no point having your gutters done if the valleys aren't done as well. The gutter guards need to be at least 2 to 3 mils in aperture. I believe it's actually 2 mils aperture to keep embers out and to keep all the leaf litter out. However, gutter guards can be a bit controversial in the sense that very fine organic material from the leaves and from pollinating trees and seeds and whatnot can still get past the gutter guard and collect in your gutters. So it's a very good idea to have your installer include or make accommodation for ways to clean or flush out your gutters periodically. Because having gutter guards doesn't mean your gutters are set and forget. You don't have to worry about them anymore. It does mean you still need to maintain them, but nowhere near as much as you would if you didn't have them. Now, gutter guards have a benefit, obviously during storms. So they help in bushfires, but they also help in storms because they'll help keep the gutters clear and help them take the higher flows a bit easier. Now, of course, water can sheet over the top of the gutters, over the mesh. So it's down to the type of the design of the mesh, how they're orientated, and how big they are. Now, it's also worthwhile thinking about your gutter sizes and make sure, and considering that rainfall intensities can increase as we move into the future, it might be worthwhile considering having slightly larger gutters to take higher flows, and also pay close attention to how the gutters are installed so that water doesn't flow backwards towards the house. Okay, and then in chimneys, again, it's a bit of a no-brainer. Not very exciting kind of retrofit, but definitely worth something to do. It should be fairly easy to fix as well. Has a benefit towards energy efficiency, bushfires, and heat waves, and not so much storms, which is fairly obvious. Now, chimneys are very good at what they do. They create a draft up the chimney to draw smoke out, Unfortunately, that will also draw in the cold embers and smoke into the house in case there's a bushfire around the area. Now, during a bushfire storm, when wind speeds are very high, the Bernoulli effect will be greatly enhanced, and that will mean that that means essentially if there's high winds at the top of the house where the chimneys are, they'll create a suction effect over the top of the chimney and blow more and suck more air up the chimney, and therefore sucking more and more air into the house. It's very common during heat waves for it to be quite hot, very windy as well. So if you have a chimney that's unblocked, you can end up having a lot of hot air being sucked into the house. Now, the same thing happens during wintertime. If you have a winter storm and it's very cold, the chimney that's not blocked will just suck more and more cold air into your house, especially if it's not very well sealed. So there's many ways of sealing your chimney. I would advise doing it with stainless steel if possible, maybe down the bottom and maybe bricks up the top. Again, talk to your builder. What's the best way of going about that? Because I'm not a builder. I don't pretend to be one. And so it's a really, really cheap and easy and no-brainer thing to do in your house to cut down on heat loss and heat gain, and also protect your house from ember attack. Also, there's much more cheaper ways of heating the house other than burning wood as well. And of course, the whole air pollution issue is something that you can also take into consideration as well. Okay, so walls. Now windows. We can talk about windows. Now, by installing double glazed windows, you can have obvious benefits across heat waves, bushfires, storms, and energy efficiency. Now, windows can severely impact on the standard thin glass windows in aluminium frames or wooden frames. Are a major source of heat loss, heat gain. So up to 40% of the home's heating energy can be lost, and up to 80% of its heat is gained through windows. So by improving the window's thermal performance reduces energy costs and greenhouse gas emissions. So double glazing with thermally broken aluminium, timber, or UV PVC frames will make a huge difference to the thermal performance of your house. And just comfort all around. And they also have the added benefit of cutting down a lot of noise. So now again, depending on your bowel rating, it will depend on which way you go. So if you happen to live in a bushfire prone area and you want to replace your windows, you will need to do a DA. But in general, that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Now, bushfire prone areas will often require that you use double toughened glass, because high heat from bushfire can make the glass shatter, and that could end up being an entry point for embers. And sometimes your bowel rating might require you to have a metal frame, not timber. But timber and UPVC is allowed up to a certain point of bowel rating. So you can get fairly standard windows up to a certain point. If you're, I think, bowel 29, bowel 40, and flame zone, you might need to use metal frames. But again, these standards should be more specific on that, so don't take my word for it. Now, if your bowel rating requires you to use toughened glass, that's okay. You can use toughened glass within a double glazed unit, so you can get the benefit of protection from bushfire as well as thermal comfort. Yeah, and that's another great thing. There's no reason why a house that's designed or retrofitted to be safe for bushfire doesn't have to also be very comfortable as well during heat waves or during winter time as well. So again, double glazing for storms. Now, I was quite surprised to find out that double glazed windows are actually naturally fairly tough. Now, obviously, toughened glass would make the before I go there, regarding toughened glass in double glazed units, only the outside pane, I believe, needs to be toughened glass. So it doesn't necessarily need to make your windows overly expensive. Okay, back to storms. Now, yeah, double glazing is naturally fairly tough. The twin panes of glass that sandwiches a pocket of gas. That setup works together to make them fairly tough, because the gas in the middle acts like a little cushion to absorb the impacts. Now, of course, if you hit it with a hammer, it's going to break. But it can take a whack, and if there's during a storm, you have a bit of debris flying around the place. Again, it could take a hit a lot better than your standard glass window would. And if you're in bushfire-prone area and you have to install toughened glass windows, well, then you get the benefit of having tough windows during a storm as well. So again, we're seeing a lot of co-benefits from doing one thing for one issue, but you also get benefits from, I guess, all these other issues. And when people are here, I talk to a lot of people, and they talk about how expensive it is to build their homes to BAL rating. They're only considering the one risk, which is bushfire, and they tend to forget about all the other benefits that come with building a house to a higher standard. And often that is thermal efficiency if they're doing it correctly, and of course protection against storms. Now, okay. Also, it's worth noting that you might also be required to install screens in front of your windows as well if you're in BAL rating, which is a good segue to the next part: external shade screens. Now, these can be installed in windows and doors, and it has a benefit towards heat waves, energy efficiency, and bushfire. Okay. Now, yeah. So the reason why you might want to shade your windows is fairly obvious. I'm sure I don't want to be telling everyone here how to suck eggs, but it's worth reiterating that it's still quite surprising how many homes around the area don't actually have any shading on the windows. Now, we're not covering on those awnings or those external shades which sit above the window, because we want to see a co-benefit to do with bushfires, storms, and heat waves. So the reason why I want to shade your windows is because, apart from the obvious, but it might come as a surprise that the direct sun can generate as much heat as a single bar radiator over each square meter of surface. So there's an awful lot of heat coming through your windows there. So by covering your window with a external screen covering, like you see in the middle picture there, it can help reduce the heat gain of a normal window, that is, by up to 50%. So when you combine that with a double glazing and good wall insulation, which you should always have anyway, you would definitely see a massive improvement in thermal comfort, in your energy bill, and yeah, just those two things there. Now, obviously for bushfire, depending on your BAL rating level, they might require it, but in other BAL levels, it's optional. So if you have an option of, if you don't have to install the screens, I would still recommend that you do, because they do have that thermal efficiency benefit there for you, and especially you'll see the benefit mostly during a heat wave, extreme heat. Now, bushfires, again, fairly self-explanatory. Screen there will keep out embers and stop those pesky flying branches from shattering your windows. And yeah, and those screens will also, to a certain degree, reduce the amount of heat transmission into the glass behind. It's also worth noting that during bushfires, it's quite common to get cyclonic conditions. We're talking about winds above 90 kilometers an hour. So, and I'm sure, as you've covered the Black Summer, you've seen some pretty terrifying things there. So things get quite wild during bushfire. Now, again, storms. Again, it's much the same thing there. So if screens protect you from flying debris during bushfire, it will protect you from flying debris during the storm as well. And this next step up is window shutters. So again, heat wave. It's pretty straightforward. The screens roll down and block out the heat. And they will do a much better job at keeping your house cool than the window screens. And they also have the added benefit of the fact that they're easy to roll up. You just roll them up and you don't have them there. Whereas the screens, you have to have them permanently. However, with screens, you can still look through them. So you have the benefit of actually looking through during a heat wave. Whereas if you have your shutters down during a heat wave, you can't look out. It would be very dark and dingy inside the house. So yeah, they'll cool your house down a good deal. Now, Again, during bushfires, again, fairly self-explanatory. Depending on your bow level, you might be required to have bushfire shutters anyway. But even if you don't have to do bushfire shutters on your house, still consider them anyway, because again, you'll get those other benefits too, and security as well. And again, storms. Pretty straightforward there. Like I said before, a lot of these things aren't necessarily earth-shattering revelations, but when put in the context of how many different benefits you can generate, it can be very, very useful. Now, walls, the doors, external doors. Again, in bushfires, these external, having a bushfire-rated door will again naturally protect you against, be added strength against bushfires. Now, depending on your barrel rating, we'll have specifics on how you approach it. And doors in general are approached in a similar way to windows are. Now, a lot of people like to have glass in their doors, in their front doors, but the less glass you have, the better. And regarding glass, the Australian standard requires that you have toughened glass indoors anyway. So that's pretty good. You don't have to go and buy a super fancy door. However, depending on your barrel level, they might have added requirements for that door. Now, again, heat waves, the more solid the door is, the less heat it's going to transmit through. So that's pretty good. Also, doors are designed for bushfire, tend to be fit a lot better within the frame, so that can help cut down drafts and keep the heat out. And being a very thick, solid door, the energy transfer through the door will be, again, a lot less. And again, it will have benefits during wintertime as well. Now, if you want to have fully glazed doors, well, by all means, go for it, but make sure the door is double glazed as well to get the benefits of the double glazing. Again, door strips, really not very exciting, but one of those small little things that when you add to your door can make a huge difference. And it's surprising how many doors in homes around Australia are just so poorly fitting that a gale just blows in underneath it. They're not very exciting, but they do a great job at keeping out embers, rain, the hot and cold air out. And I mean, just for embers, just for the sake of keeping embers out, that cheap little bar across the bottom of your door could be the difference between having a house or not having a house. So definitely one of those things that, while not very exciting, definitely worth doing. Again, the benefits towards heat waves and energy efficiency are quite straightforward. Storm, not so much, but it does keep the water out and the leaf litter out as well. Okay, so that takes us to the end of all those little sort of nuts and bolts of things that you can do around the house to make them more energy efficient, make them more resilient to bushfires, storms, and heat waves. Now, again, this is not exhaustive. If any one of those topics, whether it be energy efficiency, heat waves, storms, and bushfires, you could spend a lot more time going down into the nitty-gritty of those things. But the things I just presented just before are the ones that have benefits across the whole range of those extreme weather events and for thermal efficiency. So that's the reason why we highlighted those. Now, drafts. We want to move into drafts because the reason why I'm covering drafts is that draft proofing a house really would supercharge the energy efficiency of all the other items discussed previously. So if you did everything else I just discussed, you changed all these things, you had new windows, screens, new doors, improved skylights, all that kind of stuff, that would be good. You would get some benefit. However, if you didn't tackle the draftiness of the house, you wouldn't really get the maximum benefit of all the things you just did. And it's crazy if you don't do that, because draft proofing a house is one of the cheapest and most low-tech things you can do as well, but it would have a really big benefit to you. And if you properly tackle the drafts in your house, you can see a benefit of up to 25% on your energy bill. So that's the reason why I highlighted there. So in the picture, you can see here, this graphic here shows you where the vast majority of your leaks come from. They come through skylights, through your doors, through your floors, up the chimney, through air vents, through exhaust fans, gaps around windows, through pipes and skirting boards, air conditioning units, and gaps between the walls and ceilings. And on the chart on your left-hand side, you'll see that as a percentage, the floors, walls, and ceilings are the main culprits when it comes to the drafts, followed by ducts, fireplace, plumbing penetrations, doors, windows, fans and vents, and electrical outlets. So it's definitely worth doing, especially the floors, because I think I heard a statistic that the average Australian house has, I think, between 1 and 2 windows permanently open. That's how leaky the houses are. So yeah, so 2 windows open at all times, between 1 and 2 windows open at all times. Now, how do you find out how leaky your house is? Well, if you are renovating a house or you're building a house, it's highly recommended to make sure you get a blow door test to test your house to see how leaky it is at a certain stage during the renovation or building. It's not something which I expect many people to do. However, if you do decide to do it and you're building a new house or you're going through a major renovation, it's a good idea. So I think you should be aiming at around about, say, a natural air change per hour of 0.5. That gives you a ranking of a fairly good, a fair ranking. It's okay. Ideally, you want to get a lower number. So the best practice currently would be, I think, 0.075 air exchanges per hour. But that's quite hard to achieve unless you're building a whole new house. Of course, passive house has got, I think, 0.6, I think, is the standard to be classified as a passive house. That means basically almost no air enters or leaves the house unless you want it. Okay, so other ways of doing a draft assessment is fairly simple. You can use an incense stick. Close your house up as much as you can, and it's best done on a windy day. And you go around and you kind of go around the gaps around your house or doors, walls, and that kind of stuff, and see where the smoke from the incense goes. You can then go into your roof and inspect the insulation. If you have dirty insulation, it's a sign that air is flowing through it, and the insulation will act like a filter, capturing all the dirt particles and then making the insulation dirty. So then if you see dirty insulation, you know you've got a fairly significant draft. Cobwebs. Spiders are pretty clever. They'll set up their webs where insects come and go, and those insects will come and go in the gaps in the building, on the interior of the house. Or you could use a thermal camera. Thermal camera would be a pretty nifty way of finding out where the leaks are. And for those watching, thinking, well, where am I going to get a thermal camera? Well, you're in luck. Ku-ring-gai Council has a thermal camera for residents to borrow. So you can speak to our Sustainability Engagement Officer and request a loan, and then you can go around your house, take photographs of points around your house where you think there could be leaks, or even places where you don't think there's going to be leaks, and see if you can be surprised. The photographs you see here, you'll see that there's a leak in the corner of the ceiling there, and it's in purple. And then, of course, you see a lot of air loss through the downlight there, or I think even heat gain, I think, is in the photograph. That's heat loss, actually, yes. It's a very cold spot. That's because I think that downlight is a gimbal downlight, and that has air gaps around the light, letting all the heat out and then the cold in. Okay, so that was, again, there's many more ways of checking out how you're finding out where the drafts are. And so next we're going to cover off on draught proofing. So again, this is not an exhaustive list of how to solve the drafts, but you can do, but it's very straightforward, and a simple Google search will help you find out how to do that, tackle all these different ways of doing it. But the most obvious ways are installing a self-closing external vent, sealing gaps in your floorboards, sealing around your windows and doors, sealing around your skirting boards. That's a big one. And then and you can use caulking, foam, you name it. There's quite a few different products out there. Another source of a lot of heat gain or heat loss is via the plumbing. Hidden behind your sink, and in the bathroom and in the kitchen, the penetrations into your wall or floor can be a source of a lot of heat air coming in and out. And so it's definitely worthwhile trying to get access to those points and block up the holes there. A simple flange or Eustachian, or I forget how you call it, a little plastic thing that fits over your pipe, you can fit that onto your waste pipes and stop the draft there. And also downlights are very popular in many houses around Australia. And in that picture of the downlights there, you can see that the one on the left is a gimbaled light. And so if you look closely, you can see that there's an air gap all the way around the light. That will let all your expensive heat out or your cold out, letting other things that you don't want in. And so you can just replace those with a downlight that is fixed and doesn't have any gaps. And make sure if you do decide to do this, make sure you get an IC4 rated or ICF rated. I forget exactly which. Check with the shop. What you want is the one that's rated to be covered over by insulation. So having a downlight that can be covered by insulation would also help stop that heat loss through or heat gain through the penetration in your ceiling there from that the light causes. Okay, so which to retrofit, how to find out what do you need to tackle first. So what I'll do is I'll swap over to the website, to the Climate-Wise Communities website here. Okay, now for those who've already attended a few of these Climate-Wise Communities website, Climate-Wise Communities workshops, you will be fairly familiar with this website, and we won't go into too much detail. So what we'll do is that we'll cover off on how to use this website for those who haven't seen this website yet, how to use this website to prioritize what part of the house you need to address first in terms of making it fit for the future. So we're doing the rate check tool. You saw me scroll down to the button and click it. You just need to click agree and proceed. And then you go down to map your location. We like to use this function here is a very useful function. It helps you find out what natural hazards might affect you. So you might be here because you want to protect yourself against storm or heat wave, but you might be affected by bushfire. So this tool here helps you find out which natural hazard you might be exposed to. As you can see, we just use a property that's down the road from council here, and this house here has got bushfire risk, it's got flooding risks, it's got heat wave risk, and pretty much every risk we have in Ku-ring-gai except for the exit issues. So as you can see, he's got bushfire, ember attack, flood, storm, and heat wave. So these are the extreme weather events this house has to contend with. Okay, so we skip through to step 3 of the rate check tool. Now, by all means, you can do steps 2 as well, and this whole website will help you do your extreme weather management plan as well. That's the whole intention of this website, but we won't cover that off tonight. That's for another workshop. So this tool here, if you click on, if you know that you're bushfire affected at risk, so you can do the bushfire one. Click on that, and the color coding here shows you, tells you what part of the house, if it's strong, weak, if it's a serious weakness, if it's a moderate weakness, or if it's fairly resilient or fairly strong. So what I mean by that, I made a bit of a hash of that. What I mean by that legend is that the section below will show you different parts of the house. It's, for example, the roof design. If you have a roof that has many reentient corners, well then it's very weak, or it's very vulnerable to bushfires. But if you have a simple shape of the roof, well then it's fairly resilient. If you have an old timber shingled roof or tiles that predate 1980 with gaps in the mortar that has not been replaced, well then you have a very weak or very vulnerable roof. But if you have a tile roof post 1980 with mortar replaced within 10 years, it's fairly good. Although again, if you have a metal roof, it's fairly resilient. Now here it does say the metal roof is fairly resilient, and the green one here is a tile roof that's more resilient. That's actually a little bit the wrong way around. It should be the metal roof. And again, you can go through the whole, I won't go through the whole list of things here, so you get the idea. If you go through this process of ticking boxes against the various features of the house that relate to your house, you can get a fairly good idea about what you need to do first in terms of retrofitting your home. And how you do that is that you then, once you do that, you click Save to PDF, and then you'll get a permanent record of the things you can do. And you can repeat the process through the heatwave section there. And you can do the same thing for storm as well. Yeah. So when you click the Save to PDF, you'll get a permanent record of that. Okay. And as I mentioned before, there was we did a workshop with Nigel Bell on bushfire retrofits. So if you want more details on how to retrofit your house to bushfire, you can watch this video here. This section here has videos on many different things that we do here at council. I won't go through them all, but we have a video here on bushfire management, and here we have the video on bushfire retrofits. So if you're interested in doing retrofits for your house, by all means, come to ClimateWise Communities and click on this video and have a look. While I'm here, I might quickly go over a bushfire home assessment that we did online. Feel free to have a look at that video. And we have a section here for bushfire research and news. This video was done by CSIRO's Justin Leonard. This talk is really fascinating, goes into a lot of detail about how houses burn down. And then we have a short documentary about the Gospers Mountain fire, not too far away from here. And then again, we have a video on how bushfires are how houses are destroyed by bushfires by Justin Leonard. Again, it's very good presentation. Below you'll see there's some little notes there on on what part of the video you can skip forward to. Part 1 is about landscaping. The middle part is about Q&A at 21 minutes into it, and part 2 is house structure and bushfire. And again, you have ember attack on how houses burn down due to ember attack there. So these videos are very good for you, very good if you're interested in bushfire. Okay, so next. So we just covered off on that there. We'll skip through that. We also have bushfire retrofit rebates. So once you know what you need to do to make your house more resilient to bushfire, you can make an application to council, and we can give you up to 25% of the cost of the retrofit to a maximum of $1,000. Now we can also give you 50% of the approval costs to a maximum of $1,000 for the DA. For example, if you have a pre-existing house and you want to upgrade your windows to a double glazed bushfire rated window, that will require you to do a DA, unfortunately. But to help you get over that cost, we can give you up to 50% of that DA cost to a maximum of $500. So you could potentially get up to $1,500 for your retrofit. Now, again, there's people out there, I'm sure you're saying, well, windows cost a lot of money. Well, depending on your BAL rating and what your bushfire consultant might say, you might only need to do replace the windows on the side of the house facing the actual threat. So the amount you might need to spend could be a bit lower, and hopefully this rebate should be able to help you. If you don't necessarily live in bushfire prone areas and you're just worried about your gutters, well, I think if you live in bushfire prone areas and the ember attack zone, you can qualify for the rebate, and you can get a gutter guards, use a rebate to go towards gutter guards as well, which are fairly cheap, and a rebate should go a good way towards helping make that more efficient. Okay, so we also have other rebates that can go towards energy efficiency. Anush, do you want to speak about this?
Thanks, James. I think you could do with a short break. Look, with regards to the energy smart rebates and the green style assessment, I think quite a few of you I can see on the list have already availed the services in one form or the other. But what we do is basically try to promote energy efficiency across all homes at Ku-ring-gai. Unfortunately, most of the stock of houses we've got are pretty old, and as James mentioned, very leaky. So what we do is we try to do home assessments where we can actually go down to the house, look for opportunities on how to improve the efficiency of the house, how to try to reduce the amount of energy and water consumption by the house, and also kind of give other kind of, find other opportunities which might be useful. So it generally takes us about maybe between 1 to 2 hours to carry this out. I mean, it all depends on how many questions you would have. We're happy to go longer. And it kind of involves, before we come to your home, we do a good analysis of your interval data. So we request this data from Ausgrid on your behalf, do an analysis, and then end up coming to your house, have a bit of a chat, try to explain to you what exactly the consumption profile is, and also how it compares to a similar home in the local area. We would then do a bit of a walk around. We've got a thermal camera, as James mentioned. We've got an air quality monitor because we do realize a lot of homes have issues with mold. And it's something which I think people don't necessarily realize is all to do with lack of ventilation in the house, and it's this buildup of moisture in certain parts of the house. We try to find solutions to those too. So it's a bit of a walk. We try to find these issues. We try to find thermal leaks that could be gaps in insulation, draught proofing, gaps around doors and windows, everything that James has just covered. But we also then provide advice on the quality of appliances that you use. So if, what kind of heating and cooling that you have for space heating. One of the things about draught proofing and the level of air change that James was mentioning, where you're trying to airtight the house, one of the key important issues come up, of course, is build-up of moisture. So it's imperative you have some kind of ventilation system installed in there too. So you've got to balance these out to make a healthy home. So we do advise on both heating, cooling, and ventilation needs of the house. We look at the hot water systems that you have. A lot of hot water systems generally go on for years and years, and people don't realize, especially with the electrical systems or electrical storage systems that they have, that there are sacrificial anodes there that need replacing. So before those systems reach failure, we're able to at least guide you in terms of what you should be looking at, whether it's heat pump hot water systems or solar hot water systems, what is more suitable for your needs. We can kind of advise you on that, or at least prepare you what kind of research or what kind of questions to ask if you do have a supplier coming through. We'll also advise you on solar, PV, and battery storage, and look at pool, so energy consumption by your swimming pools. So it's a kind of a holistic approach. I'm quite keen even on things like flooding and stuff, so I wouldn't want to get in there because, of course, we're not qualified to provide you advice, but we can definitely find solutions when we come down to small issues that you might have. It could be just, putting ag pipes around your drainage systems and things like that. So it's a good starting point for people who don't know where to start from. And we kind of support all those actions through rebates. So the Energy Smart rebates, you can claim up to about $2,250 depending on what you have in the house. But they're $500 each for solar PV or battery storage. There's another $500 you can claim towards insulation, even if it's just topping up your insulation. There is another $500 towards installation of your heat pump or a solar hot water system when it's replacing a storage system, and $500 towards window retrofits. So that's one of the key things which I think overlaps with what James has been saying with regards to bushfire retrofits. So we can kind of look at it. We may not, I per se would not have much information in terms of the requirements for bushfire, but from energy savings perspective, there's a lot of advice we can provide you. There are a couple of things that we notice householders do when you're undertaking renovations is that when you're looking at glazing, you tend to pick up a specific type of window and you apply it to the entire house. But I think you must also understand that the requirements for each different orientation is very different. So you do need to keep in mind and do consult with someone who knows about it. An environmental consultant is the best person to actually speak to, or a very good architect like Andy is here. I mean, he would be the right person to be talking if you were to engage him. So they would carry out modeling for your house for whatever retrofits you're doing, and they can actually tell you what the performance of the house is going to be once you just looking at the plans on how it would perform once your work has been completed. So it's worthwhile doing those few steps before you undertake any kind of renovations. So yes, you can definitely reach us, give us a call. We'd be happy to talk with you, even if it's a problem in one particular room. I'll be more than happy to, try to explore what are the opportunities. It is a little difficult now. I know James mentioned that you can borrow infrared camera from us. I'm the keeper of the infrared camera, so please feel free to reach out. Unfortunately, because of the lockdown, we are kind of holding back, but as soon as council opens up a little bit, I would actually drop by your home. I'll give you the camera, explain to you how to work it through, come back and pick it up at a later stage. If you're quite busy and you're passing by the council, you're more than welcome to drop that back. But it'll be good to have a chat and at least get that conversation started. So I'll pass it back to James if he has had his bit of a break and a drink.
Yes. Thank you very much for that, Anuj. And actually, Anuj, you really did remind me actually about another service we do provide the residents of Ku-ring-gai. And this ties in really well with tonight's theme of future fit home and bushfire, storm, heat waves, and energy smart. We have a service or rebate where if you have plans drawn up by a designer or someone for renovation, and you're planning on doing a renovation, you can have your plans assessed by a suitably qualified architect and designer. And so if you, I think it's up to, no, I think it's $250.
It was $200 towards the cost of engaging an environmental consultant. This, yes, unfortunately was kind of dropped off the radar going forward this year. But look, we'll be happy to entertain it if there were anyone who was interested in doing so, because the cost of doing these, the modeling, it doesn't really cost much. It would be anywhere between $600 to maybe about $1,000 to $1,200 at the most, depending on the complexities of your plans. But you can definitely claim $200. It's no longer there, so hence it's not advertised on the website, because we had a lot of financial strain in terms of the number of rebates we were giving out. It went through the roof last year. We kind of finished off and ran out of funds halfway through the year. So we've kind of re-looked at it, and hence we decided not to go ahead with it because there was no uptake at all. So I think people got to know about these rebates very late in the process of planning, and we could only inform them once DAs came in, because we didn't know what people, at what stage of planning they were in. And I think we couldn't reach through to them through our regular social media channels. So we just didn't have anyone. I think we've just had one application that came through for it over the last 3 years that we've had it. So that's the reason we decided to let go of it. But I'll be happy to entertain it, as I said.
Well, seeing as there's a huge amount of interest in tonight's presentation, maybe it sparked a few people's imaginations and sort of hopefully caught everyone at the right time. And if they're planning on doing a renovation and you want to have your plans assessed, send us an email so we know they're interested. And if there's enough interest, maybe as we could revive the project. But anyway, I don't want to talk ahead of myself. But if that's something that you find would be a benefit to you, let us know. So, okay. Also, so just quickly moving on. The next thing is, again, some more information, some background reading. The first one here is an article written about how you can design for both bushfire resistance and thermal performance of your house. So again, following the theme of tonight's workshop of a co-benefit. You do one thing, but you can also get another benefit from that too. And then you also have the presentation by Nigel Bell on beating the bushfire, retrofitting for safer homes and making in safer homes in bushfire-prone areas. And getting towards the very end of the workshop now. Is this toolkit here? It's called the Green Rebuild Toolkit. Now, this toolkit was, I believe, developed primarily for homes that were lost during the Black Summer bushfires. However, there is a section dedicated to retrofits, and if anyone here watching tonight's presentation is interested in rebuilding or doing a renovation, the information contained within this toolkit would still be of huge benefit to you, because it's designed or presented in a way that takes into consideration the environmental considerations and energy efficiency and bushfire as well. So I would highly recommend having a look at the toolkit. The URL the URL is down below. It's greenrebuildtoolkit.com. And if you want to get the link to that, just email me here at Ku-ring-gai Council. My email is cwc@kmc.newsouthwales.gov.au. And I think that brings us to the Q&A. The Q&A section. So I'll stop screen share right now. I'll also tell you what, before I do that, I'll skip to the last slide, to the thank you slide. So a bit premature here, but if you have any additional questions, you can go to the website I just showed you, the ClimateWise Communities website. The link is just down below, climatewisecommunities.com.au. And you can there's a section called Ask an Expert. If you if you fill the form out there, that email will come directly to me, and I can answer any of your questions. So anyway, let's go to the Q&A. I hope everyone has lots of really good questions.
Well, I'm mindful of the fact that we are recording it, so I'll avoid taking names, but there is a question. What's the difference between toughened glass and laminated glass?
Okay. Well, yeah, laminated glass, I think it's laminated with plastic, and it generally makes it tough. Actually, on this note, I think I might, for safety's sake, defer to the expert we have lurking in the background. Andy, do you want to take this one?
Sure, thanks, James.
No worries.
So, sorry, laminated glass is two bits of glass stuck together, laminated together with an interlayer, which is a plastic thing, which you generally can't see when you look head on to the glass. Whereas toughened glass is glass that is cut to the right size and then baked in an oven. Key difference is when toughened glass breaks, it will shatter into little cubes like a shower screen does, like car windows can do. Whereas laminated glass, when you try and smash it, because of the interlayer, generally speaking, it stays in place. So difference in that sense. There's a whole bunch of science around the interlayers, and different types of interlayers can do different things. Laminated glass is really good for acoustics. Toughened glass is like single pane glass, which is not great for acoustics.
Well, Andy, I might as well have a follow-up question, because I'm just wondering whether laminated glasses do come in double glazing, because obviously it's the right kind of glass to use for storms or anything else.
Yep, it can do. It doesn't normally. Like your standard double glazing is two bits of glass with a gap in between them, but you can make the outside pane or the inside pane whatever you like. There's no real constraints. The biggest constraint is actually every Windows system will have a maximum thickness of glazing units that it can take. And that's the only thing. So when you add up the thickness of the outside layer, the gap in the middle, and the inside layer, that's normally the only thing, apart from money, that will constrain what you can do.
And while we're talking about double glazing, it's the cost of double glazing is actually coming down as well. So it's not as unaffordable as a lot of people might think. So definitely keep an eye out. I don't know if I should mention how much it cost me to get my house double glazed, and now actually be a good point to talk about it. One of the reasons why I was running this workshop is because I have actually personal experience with having a house trashed, as I mentioned, due to a hailstorm. And instead of using insurance money to rebuild or repair the house to the same old standard it was pre-disaster, pre-hailstorm, I didn't want to do that. It didn't make sense. It seemed like a bit of a waste of an opportunity. So I got the insurance money and used some extra funds, and in fact Andy Marlowe here helped me with the designs. We engaged him as an architect to come up with a renovation that was going to make the house a lot more resilient going towards the future. So that featured additional insulation, walls and ceilings, double glazing all around, new roof. So I got a metal roof instead of a tile roof because I really did not want to have to go through the whole drama of having a damaged house and go through insurance, which was a major pain. And got a rainwater tank as well, and some other features done to the house, which made it really nice. So yeah, and the double glazing did actually come in a lot cheaper than what I was expecting, and that was a godsend. Having a much more affordable double glazing has made a huge difference, especially during lockdown right now. So, so any additional questions, Anuj? So we have a question from Warwick. So regarding windows and insect screens, PVC double glazing windows are okay on the front. Wasn't sure if in bushfire zones, if the insect screens are what they required to be metal and insect screens inside rather than exposed outside with embers. Okay, so let me just read that again. So you're not sure if in bushfire zones if insect screens are also required? Yeah, actually yes. In bushfire zones, screens in general, they're not specifically insect screens, but they do double as insect screens, and they can be required in the front. Depends on what your bow level is. Up to a certain point, you have the option of having a screen in front of your windows, or you can have a different set of windows. So it really depends on your bow level. The higher up in bow levels you go, the more things you might need to put in front of your windows, whether it be a shutter or a screen. You can have insect screens on the inside of double glazing, but with my double glazing I had installed, they were internal openings. So they were actually tilt and turn windows, which meant the windows turned on the inside, which meant that I could have permanent fly screens on the outside, and they work quite well.
The principle behind the screens in the bushfire code is really that anything that's operable, so any window that can be opened as opposed to a fixed window at the lower bow levels, that can be opened, i.e. you could leave the window open and the embers would still not come inside. And that's why there's a requirement for them to not be fiberglass, because fiberglass melts pretty easily. And at the lower levels, you don't need screens on the fixed windows. But at higher levels, you can do. And what's happening there is there's a point where the windows just explode, and therefore it reduces the chances of stuff getting inside if there's a fly screen as well. It also reduces radiant heat a bit, although it's a bit minimal.
Perfect, nice one. And Warwick, just to answer your follow-up question, yes, the screens would need to be on the outside of the window and be made of metal, as Andy just mentioned. Yes, fiberglass would not work very well. Okay, so we have another question here. Underfloor insulation for house on piers. What are thoughts on this? Yeah, go for it. I wish I'd done it. I really missed an opportunity there on my house. I'm currently regretting it. Underfloor insulation would be fantastic, especially during a heat wave. Now, underfloor insulation in terms of its risk during bushfire, well, I suppose it depends on how you protect your underfloor area from ember attack. So now, I don't know if underfloor insulation comes with a flammability rating, and this is something which Andy can maybe clarify, but regardless of what kind of insulation you use as flammability level, you should always make sure your subfloor area around your house is screened with mesh. Any gaps is covered with mesh, metal mesh, to stop embers from entering. So Andy, do you want to answer that question about flammability of insulation?
In some ways, it doesn't matter too much in that you protect the insulation, or you're protecting your building from ember attack. So you pick where you want to do it. So you said like you can enclose around the subfloor and enclose down to the ground. That's option A. Option B, depending on what your subfloor supports, whether they're brick piers or timber or whatever, your other solution is to protect at the underside of the floor structure level instead. So you can do either. The bushfire code doesn't really care. In a practical sense, it doesn't matter. There's no harm with embers getting under your building. so long as there's then something that's fairly fireproof, fibre cement sheets, fairly common, on the underside of the floor structure. So there's nothing wrong with a few embers under the house, so long as they've got nowhere meaningful to go. So it's a bit of horses for courses. Insulating, closing down into the ground, depending on materials, can be a bit tricky. Fibre cement sheet shouldn't really be buried in the ground if you want to have a warranty. So let's talk to your architect about the best way to do it. But there's a myriad of options. But yes, I'm sorry. Yes, insulate. James, your point's spot on.
Yeah, I really wish I'd done it. So yes, it's definitely worth doing. So also, Andy, just one quick question. I think this is a tail on, this follows on from the underfloor insulation. Should people just do the bats, or should they also do an additional layer underneath the bats? So the bats underneath the floors, and then a wrap underneath, just to support the to finish everything off. Should they do that, or just stick with just the bats underneath the floor?
It sort of depends. So if you're bushfire prone, you probably want to be enclosing with something that's non-combustible. So fibre cement sheet, like I said, it's a pretty good option. If you're not bushfire prone, or if you've done your bushfire protection at the perimeter of your subfloor, then your only real aim of that sort of protection layer is, well, there's two bits. One is to stop the insulation falling out. Three bits, actually. Number two is to stop rodents getting in, because it's pretty toasty in there and it's a pretty appealing place to hang out. But also it's around controlling air tightness. So we would often use the same wraps that we use on walls and roofs on the underside of the floor and still tape the joints, because we're trying to control air leakage in and out of the house at the same time. So you can do it with FC sheet. It's harder with FC sheet because it's a solid material, which is more awkward to maneuver. But all of them can work, just depends on the situation.
Great, perfect. Okay, thanks for that, Andy. Okay, also double glazing. Yeah, so what did the double glazed windows cost? Okay, well, seeing as it's my house and I pay the money, I think I feel fairly comfortable telling everyone. $10,000 was the cost of getting my entire house double glazed. Now, granted, I don't have a big house. I'm only on a council salary, so I can't afford a mansion. So it's just a 2-bedroom house, a 3-bedroom house, a small one, about, I think, 90 square meters, I believe, Andy, I think it worked out to be, is the size of my house. And we had double glazed sliding doors and a fixed window up the top in the roof, just to let more light, not a skylight, but just a wall window. And that was quite affordable. It was quite good. It made a huge difference to our overall budget. So definitely, double glazing doesn't have to cost the world. It can be quite affordable. So with another question here, is about related to energy efficiency, but probably also relates to storms and bushfires, given that they will be destroyed in a bushfire storm. There seems to be an ongoing issue with solar panels. Very interesting question, and batteries. Even last night on 7:30, there was another story regarding reliability and problem providers. What are the thoughts on solar panels and batteries in relation to energy efficiency, storms, and fire? Okay, well, there's a lot to unpack on that question. In terms of energy efficiency, fairly straightforward. It depends on who you go with. There are a lot of fly-by-the-night providers or suppliers of solar power and that. So I would definitely, Anush, feel free to jump in here as well. It's definitely it pays to do research on who you're going with. The solar energy council or solar power council,
Clean Energy Council.
That's the one, Clean Energy Council. Anush, do you want to take over this one just for the energy efficiency?
With regards to energy efficiency, solar is definitely a no-brainer because it does get your energy costs down and also your consumption. The payback period is now less than 5 years. So it just kind of makes financial sense and also environmental. I think what you're referring to with regards to storm and bushfires, invariably when there is a bushfire coming, or even if there's a storm and there's a blackout, the systems are connected in a way to shut down automatically. So they're absolutely safe. With regards to shoddy energy providers, I think that's what you're referring to regarding reliability problem providers. Or I'm not quite sure whether you're referring to energy retailers or you're looking at.
I think it's mostly about providers from the solar panels. People people knocking your doors on your door, selling you a cheap solar power setup.
So the thing about that is you get there's a whole range of products that are being sold. So it becomes very hard for you to compare apples to apples. That's one thing. However, all the products that are generally being sold have been approved to have Australian standards. The problem is that the cost of it is so low that they do not have anywhere that they can increase their profit margins other than the fact they can reduce the cost of installation. And that's where the problem arises, because it's the shoddy installation basically relates down to a low price that they're offering you. So don't be tempted to go with a small price tag with the system. The prices are always coming down. You can definitely do your homework. You want somebody reliable, you should look at a Clean Energy Council accredited supplier. Look at Google reviews of anyone who comes down to you trying to sell a product. Invariably, you'll have a lot of people actually talking about how good or bad they are. So word of mouth is generally what helps in most cases, but if your neighbor has had a good experience with the installer, it doesn't necessarily mean you will have. And that's one reason why the council actually refrains from promoting any particular business altogether, because we realized when we tried doing this, vetting out suppliers so that it made it easier for residents to go ahead with an installation, not everybody had the same experience and the council got the flag for it. So we kind of made a policy where we wouldn't do that, but we can definitely equip you with the right questions to ask when you're going down that path. So please feel free to get in touch with us.
And I believe the same advice would definitely go towards batteries as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, there's one thing about with regards to storms, etc., which I thought was what one of the questions was, that you can set a system. Say if you've got a battery storage, along with your solar PV system, and you've got a blackout, you do have a blackout protection that can be installed. It's just a small switch. It costs about $400 to $500 extra. In which case, if you were not to have electricity for a lengthy period of time, several days, your solar panels would still work and charge the battery up independently like an off-grid system, and it'll still keep the grid safe. So there's no power being exported back into the grid, and hence Ausgrid people can do their work, repair works without getting electrocuted. So there is a way to set that up, but that's what you should be speaking with your installers when you're looking to go down that path.
Yeah, and yes, exactly. So if you manage to get a good quality solar and battery installation, it should provide you with a backup during storms. And during a bushfire, power is the first thing to get cut. One of the first things to get cut, along with the water supply to your house. A fire has a great way of cutting power supply to homes. So having an independent setup in your house is very handy. However, there's a whole we can go down a whole range of a whole another discussion about bushfires and that kind of stuff. But just getting, I think, like Anush said, just it's worthwhile doing research to try and get a really good setup. So then the next question is about airflow. Yes. Yeah, they will. If they keep embers out, they will reduce airflow through the house. Now, again, it does come down to the type of screen you get, and whether it's one that's easy to remove or install. If it's a roller screen or whatever, it really depends on what you get, what you have installed. Yes, but in short, yes, the screens could reduce airflow into your house. However, if you have a really well-performing house, you might not necessarily need the airflow. Your house will be comfortable. If you have double glazing, insulation, draught proofing, the internal air temperature should be quite comfortable. However, like Anush said, you do need to make sure you have a good ventilation to make sure air quality is kept high. In fact, I think Andy would like to remember this. There's in the house building circle or good building practice in general, they have a phrase called build tight and ventilate right. So yeah, good ventilation goes hand in hand with building tight as well. So next question, how do you determine the bowel rating applicable to your home and block, and the level required to meet? Okay, so the first part is, well, it's the most obvious one is you go to a BAL assessor and pay them a bit of money to get a BAL rating. However, if that does cost money, you can do a self-assessment of that. There's information on the RFS website where you can get your own BAL rating made, but I'm not quite sure if I would actually want to go down that route myself, because it is technical and it does require expertise. So paying a bushfire consultant to do that for you is something which I would advise. The second part of that question is this specific to a block or generally based on BAL guidance based on distance from bush? Again, the BAL rating is based on all different kind of factors. It could be a distance to the bush. It could be a slope to the bush. It could be a whole different range of factors. Now, I believe in the Bushfire Retrofit presentation done by Nigel Bell, which you can watch on via Council's YouTube channel or via the Climate Wise Community's website, Nigel does go into a bit of detail about how BAL levels are determined and what constitutes a BAL level or BAL rating. So I'm not really the best person to answer that question. For a bit more detail, check the video out, and then obviously consult a bushfire consultant who can tell you more or even do one for you.
James, if I may just jump in there with a question relating to that, would you be aware that if any work that's been carried out by residents, especially in bushfire-prone land, would require a DA, does council require them to have a BAL rating by a professional? Yes.
Okay, that's a very good question. And this is one of the things that relates to the retrofit rebate program. It is a bit of a tricky one. If you have a BAL rating, some items, some retrofits would require DA. One example is windows. If you have windows and doors, if you have a property that's been tagged as being on bushfire prone land, you would need to get a DA to replace windows and doors, for example. That's one example there, and you would need to get a BAL rating done for that and a report by a bushfire consultant. If you to get more specific answers or to that question, you can always contact council and ask to speak to a duty planner, and they can give you a bit more of a detailed answer as to how to go about that process of getting DA for your windows or doors. It does seem a bit excessive having to go through a DA just to replace a window or door, but the intention behind the legislation, I'd imagine, please don't quote me on this, is just to make sure that any work that's done in the bushfire prone area is done to a higher standard. But anyway, this is another topic of conversation which we could definitely talk a lot about. But in short, yes, some retrofit work does require a DA and a BAL rating for that. Next question, does floor installation make it more difficult for pest inspectors to identify termite issues? I don't know about that.
I can take, I'll let Andy step in.
If it's done properly, no. Basically, assuming that, well, you've got a house up on stumps of some description, the point of inspection is the ant caps, which are generally on top of a brick pier, and they should not be enclosed in insulation, so they should still be visible. So it shouldn't make any difference at all.
Oh, and if you have any doubts, it just makes sense getting a pest control company to come do the inspection before you go ahead and install that insulation and ensure that nothing can come up.
Bearing in mind that the building code assumes that you get pest inspection of your home done every 6 months, regardless. So you should always be able to see those ant caps. But any competent builder or insulation installer would not cover those things up. So yeah, just check. Okay,
great. Well, that's an easy one to answer. If it's done properly, it's not an issue at all. Okay, well, it's 7:45, and I think now's a good time to wrap everything up. And thank you everyone for your questions. That was really good. I'm glad a lot of good questions were coming through there. And I really hope everyone got a lot out of it. Again, if you have any other questions, please feel free to send your questions into me via the Climate-Wise Community's website. I'll quickly put that web address in the chat box for everyone to get if you want. So it's www.climatewise.com.au. Okay, cool. So everyone's got an email there. Sorry, it's badly written. Anyway, there's again, send those questions through to me via the Ask an Expert, and I'll do my best to answer them for you. And if I can't answer them for you, I'll definitely send them on to our experts. We even have Justin Leonard, the bushfire researcher from CSIRO. He's more than happy to answer your questions as well. So send them through to me, and I'll do my best to get your questions answered by all the relevant experts around. And on that note, I'd like to say a really huge thank you to Andy Marler from Envirotecture for helping out with those bit more tricky questions there. And also a huge thank you to Anuj, my colleague from Ku-ring-gai Council, for helping out with tonight's presentation and answering, again, your questions on energy efficiency. Yes, I'm looking for, so I'll close the workshop now, and I wish everyone a pleasant evening, and good luck with the rest of the lockdown. All the best. Stay safe.